Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Anthony Hachem.
How's it going?
Pretty good. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Anthony is an instructor with First Landings.
Yep.
Soon to be going off and doing flying the big boy toys. You were also Derek's instructor throughout all of his training, right?
Yes, I was fortunate enough.
Or unfortunate. I don't know which one, but no, Derek's solid. Thank you for doing everything that you've done with him. I mean, for him to get to where he is at, you know, what, just 12 months was, it's been really cool to see only, 10 months for me of seeing what he's done. So that's pretty awesome. Okay. We got a few softener questions. Okay.
Okay.
What was your hardest rating?
My hardest would probably, I would say, CFI for sure.
Yep.
Just being able to go from all the knowledge you learned from private to commercial, and now just having that knowledge and teaching it for people that have no prior experience, that was like definitely the most challenging part.
Yeah,
and being good at it too.
Kind of drinking from the fire hose and then being tested about how well you drank from the fire hose.
Pretty much, yeah, and how well you're gonna do once you're there. Not only knowledge wise, but most likely regulatory wise, because now you have to be careful on allowing other people to exercise solo privileges, and that's a big liability for you as a flight instructor, is being able to do that safely and make sure they have what they need so it doesn't go back and kind of fall on your shoulders if they mess up.
It's a real challenge. Okay. IFR or VFR? Preference?
Preference, I would probably say personally IFR.
Right.
I'd say the regulations and kind of the order and things when you fly under instrument flyers, you already know what to expect. You kind of already are on a flight plan with ATC. You're kind of, they already know what you're gonna do, and it's a little bit more, I'd say, freedom in airspace.
Yep.
You're kind of cleared through the entire thing, and you're pretty much guaranteed to have somebody with you along the way.
Yeah.
So it's a layer of safety.
It is definitely a force multiplier, a safety multiplier that now you've got a lot of people looking out for you and letting you know if there is something around, whether they're talking to them or whether they're not. So I would 100% agree.
Yeah, especially weather. I mean, now, like, weather is a big part of, not saying VFR flying, I'd say, is the most fun.
Yep.
It gives you the ability to do what you want, like, without having to stick to a specific route or anything like that. But definitely, if you're trying to get from point A to point B and you have that rating and there's some weather along the way that, you decided it's safe to navigate through, then I'd say IFR is definitely a plus, and it definitely makes you a better pilot. So you got to keep those skills sharp. So I think if I go somewhere on a cross country, I try to do it IFR.
Yeah, definitely safer. Okay, now I already know the answer to this one, but career path. So you've already done the instructor bit, and what's in the future?
So my goal is pretty much, as of right now, is the airlines, preferably 121, 135. But that's definitely not I definitely enjoy GA flying. So I'm exploring every opportunity there is, especially things like ferry flying and ferry opportunities. I like flying GA. Personally, I believe it's a little bit more rewarding. But as far as career goals, I think the airlines are my final destination.
That's
you'd
awesome.
Say.
Let's not reference that movie, anyone. Okay. Single engine or multi-engine preference?
Well, I'm not sure if I would have a preference. As far as an extra layer of safety, I believe multi-engine would be better. Now, it definitely comes with a few challenges. It doesn't mean, if you have one more engine, doesn't mean you're good to go. It's mostly one more layer of aerodynamics that you're going to have to navigate around, especially if one of those engines fails. Yeah. So it could definitely be a plus in some areas. It could definitely be to your disadvantage if you don't know how to handle that second engine.
Yeah.
Or the negatives of any sort of potential failures. But as far as multi-engine preference, I would probably say that.
Okay.
would be my preference.
And then tail wheel or tricycle?
Definitely tricycle.
Okay.
Definitely tricycle. From what I've seen in tail wheel, it's a lot easier to get yourself in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, ground loops are real.
Ground loops and nosing over also is like.
Yep, you hit those
From
brakes.
what I've seen, those accidents are also predominant in tricycle. So if you're a little rusty or not really, you don't really have sharp stick and rudder skills, tail wheel can definitely throw you in for a rude awakening.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a little bit more catered to the bush flying community.
Right. Okay. So as we're going through, let's talk. You were Marine. You did 4 years, correct?
Yes.
What got you into aviation after you left the military?
So when I was in the military, part of my time there, I was attached to an air wing, and I was actually seeing the Marine Corps flies the Aviate Harrier, which is capable of vertical flight. I've seen some of those on the carriers and the air ground station in 29 Palms in California.
Okay.
And I mean, my family comes from an aviation background, first of all, so that was kind of what got me started. But after the military, it was mostly my experience in there seeing other people fly these cool jets. I was like, it was kind of a little sense of jealousy a little bit. I'm like, you know what? I want to do this. Like, I want to be able to get in the flight deck one day and kind of do cool stuff and just fly for a living maybe, or just fly for fun. But it was definitely something like, I want to try this out. I want to see what all this is about, getting up in the air and just experiencing that.
Right. So how did it go after you left the military? How did you start flying?
So my brother was already an airline first officer.
Can you say which airline?
Yeah, he worked for GoJet for a little bit, and then he moved on to a legacy carrier.
Okay.
And he was like, you know what? First of all, it was expensive. I was looking into options. I was like, I want to do this. I want to sign up. So I was looking at options, predominantly Part 141 schools. And I was like, it's more of a structured program. It can be done in a certain amount of time. And then,
but it's $100,000
for me. It was
plus.
The price point. That was an insane amount of money at first. And I was like, you know what? Let me see what sort of other options there is. And I was fortunate enough to have family that was already in the business, because I know a lot of people don't have kind of that mentorship in the beginning. They don't really know where to start looking, so they sign up for those big loans and big price points to enter the aviation world. But I was fortunate enough for my family to introduce me to one of their friends. It was a small little Part 61 flight school in Indiana. And back in 2021, I would say I seriously started kind of looking into starting my aviation career.
Right.
And that's kind of how I first got started. It was a one-man operation, one-plane operation kind of thing. And it was pretty nice because I kind of had the plane all to myself at first.
Right.
So that's kind of what got me started.
So, I've touched on this before, and I think we're actually going to do a complete episode on it eventually. Is most people look at the flight training and they're like, man, it's $100,000, $120,000.
Right.
And I've said it on a few occasions where I'm like, okay, well, potential earnings are somewhat in line with what a doctor is, right? So if you look at what a doctor is paying for medical school and the amount of time that they're going to medical school, I mean, they're 4 years on a general degree and then another 4 years on a medical, 4 years on general, then 4 years on medical, and then they've got residency, which is just taxing to say the very least.
Right.
And the amount of money that they will make after that. And then you look at the fact of, okay, you pay $100,000, you get your ratings, you're going to do your time building, then you're going to progress on to a regional, or basically a regional, right?
Right.
And inside of a regional, you're going to make relatively decent money. I mean, I would say it's pretty decent money.
A lot better than it used to be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, 30,000 when so back in 2007, it was 30,000 a year, I think. And now they're into the 70 plus.
Right.
And that's with the hour differential of how long you're going to be sitting on reserve and all that kind of stuff. But once you've got a line, now you're $90,000 a year relatively easily.
Right.
And that's just starting out. Once you get into the the majors, legacies, now you're going to be making six figures without even having to think about it. So we probably are going to do an episode on that. Maybe we could pull you in for that.
Yeah,
one,
I mean, I'd be willing to share some information on
I think that would be good. And the benefit is that a lot of the information as far as pay scales is already out there.
Right.
Airline Pilot Central. I've said this before.
Right, and it's an industry standard. Pretty much
Yeah.
all kind of start off being the same.
We did have an instructor on that said, and it was a very valid point with don't get into aviation or don't get into it as a career because of the money.
Right.
I think there does need to be a layer of passion that's there, but if you're going to go for a career, you're looking at it as being, what am I going to make? Right.
Right.
If you're just trying to do something that you love, hopefully you find something that pays well and that you love and it works. But that's kind of hit and miss at times, right?
Right. Especially people that start off, like they want to do this as a career. It's also kind of what I've seen lately as well as they have some sort of expectation bias as far as starting out. Obviously, they look at the pay, they look at the potential, kind of like what you said about the doctors and what they're going to make after their investment. I think you brought up a pretty good point is if you want to start doing this, definitely don't just do it because you see the potential rewards and the money.
Yeah.
I mean, as most people know now, we're kind of in a little bit of a slow hiring environment.
Yep.
And that's kind of just the nature of the beast in the aviation world. You're going to come through parts where hiring is slow. You're going to come through parts where it's just post-COVID and nobody's hiring. And I think it's just the reasons you started doing this is what's going to kind of get you through the hard times, I would say.
Yep.
And you need that passion to keep you going because they're not going to you want an airline job, but they're going to see how much you worked on yourself during that time, even during the downturns. So definitely get started doing that.
Yeah, and you're almost guaranteed you're going to see a furlough at some point in your career.
Right, absolutely.
So that did actually just kind of leverage me into wanting to ask a question. Okay, so most students, especially during private, are going to experience that plateau. Right. But it happens throughout all the ratings, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it does hit that point. What is your main piece of advice for when somebody does hit that plateau? I'll tell you what I normally tell people, and then you tell me if you agree, right? Okay. I normally tell people, get up and go and have enjoyable flights.
Right.
Don't just get stuck in that treadmill or, the hamster wheel of constantly doing training. Go and do an enjoyable flight. Go fly for breakfast. Go fly down to, the Keys. We're blessed that we live in a state that turns out a huge percentage of pilots.
Right.
It is a massive percentage of all pilots that are being trained in the U.S. or being trained in Florida. We get a massive amount of flying days per year. And we have some really cool places to fly to.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, go and enjoy that. You've got to go and enjoy it. So anyway, I hijacked that one. What do you normally tell people?
So, I mean, most of the time, when I see private pilots experience that, or any student for that matter, it's usually they get stuck in that check ride prep mindset, and then or pre-solo, or they kind of get into some sort of difficult situation in their training, and they're like, I can't get past this. And I believe that's kind of where the instructor has to kind of step in and be like, hey, let's do something else. Let's try to, like, it's not all about the check ride. It's not about taking the test and getting your rating. It's about enjoying. You're paying a lot of money to do this, so you might as well
be a
have
mentor,
fun doing
right?
it,
Yeah, be a mentor.
Might as well just have fun doing it if you're paying all that money. So usually I kind of present some challenges, like, okay, if they hit their point on a short field landing, like, let's try to make this a little bit more challenging. Let's try to make it realistic and go to an actual short field, or go to some place in an airport that it's actually challenging and not just simulate conditions.
Yeah.
And that when they see their kind of their own skills improving a little bit, they get part of that fire back in them, and they're like, you know what, I can probably actually do this. It's all about challenging themselves and kind of really digging deep into, why are you doing this? What's your passion? What do you want to get out of this?
Well, so Derek is obviously just passed his CFI, right? So Derek is actually on microphone, but he is not on camera for this. So I'm just going to poke this across and say, hey, Derek, right? What's your piece of advice for somebody that hits a plateau?
Get with Anthony. No, I'm fine. Yeah, I mean, I feel like my main one was kind of in between that commercial and like instructor period where like you're doing a lot of like ground knowledge, a lot of ground training, and you're not like getting used to, you're not going out for a fun flight anymore. Right. I wish I would have done a little bit more of that, but kind of just echoing what you guys said, going out and figuring out why you enjoy this again, kind of, or putting wheel to road, if you will.
Go back to basics, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So my instructor used to do a couple of different things. He'd be like, okay, look, let's especially down at Kissimmee, because you've got a lot of different options down at Kissimmee. So he'd be, okay, if you can hit the first turnoff for the taxiway, then I'll buy lunch.
Right.
If you don't, you have to buy lunch and you have to buy beer.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was pretty dialed in on, okay, I'm nailing this, and I'm turning off, and I'm going to hit that very first turn off for the taxiway. And I can tell you that the first 20 times he laid down that bet, he was eating my lunch, right? But after that, I started dialing it and really hitting it and being able to pull off. Oh, yeah. Now, well, there's a challenge there, right? It's still safe. It's still well within inside of regulations, guidelines. Nobody's stressed. And if you know that you're going to mess it up, it teaches you, I'm going to mess this up. I should really do a go-around right now. And it starts teaching that critical thinking. So I was very, very comfortable with everything at Kissimmee in that environment. So it was a great learning experience. Okay, so I've asked this 100 times on this podcast. What's your number one piece of advice for somebody that's just wanting to get into aviation?
I think advice I would give out is get with somebody who's already in the industry. Get a mentor. Get somebody who kind of knows the ins and outs. That's something I was very fortunate to have, and I know a lot of people don't have, is somebody to kind of guide them through it, whether it's an instructor or family member or something like that. Get with somebody that can kind of show you the way of training, show you what to avoid. Because there's plenty of pitfalls that student pilots can fall into starting out. And kind of see a little bit what works with you, because you really want something to kind of accommodate your own environment. If you have a family, if you have any sort of obligations, training is going to be a challenge. This is pretty much a full-time job in and of itself, is flight training. So I would probably say kind of lay your priorities down and really consider if this is something that you are going to get rewarded from doing. Is this a passion that you're wanting to kind of get into? You need to be able to, it's a lot more work. It's a lot more ground study than people think. And that's what I feel is sometimes can be a detriment to some pilots, is they didn't really expect how much self-starting ability this is going to take, and how much self-motivation this is going to take. So you need to kind of be able to understand that you're going to have to push yourself through this. You can't just, it is a lot of money and you're going to expect a service out of it, but at the same time, it's a lot of work that you're going to have to put into it. So I would say be able to have the maturity and the dedication that takes in order to complete flight training, because it's a hard road. It's definitely an uphill battle.
Yeah. Well, there's a good reason why it has such a high percentage rate of dropouts inside of private, right? Is they hit that plateau, and hopefully they've got a good instructor that is going to help them through that plateau. But there's an awful lot of people that hit that plateau and then just stop. Right. And to come back after any kind of a break,
it's a lot.
It's a real struggle. Yeah. I've definitely hit the plateau. Fortunately I had an absolutely great instructor that taught me through it. I had an emergency that kind of, an emergency during private definitely kind of, gives you a little bit of a butt tweaking is what I would probably say.
A wake up call.
To keep it polite. It's a wake up call. But it's how you handle that. Right. And then coming back, getting back in that plane after is a big thing. So that was absolutely, I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Right.
I mean, I would have liked it not to have happened.
Right.
But,
You
having
learn
that
from
experience-
anything in aviation, basically.
having that experience there was absolutely great.
Yep.
I got a question for Anthony, real quick,
Oh, go
to
on.
jump in. How many people have you seen? Because you're obviously at the tail end of your instruct. Well, not you. You still want to instruct after this,
Right.
But you've done your 1500, etc. How many people have you come across honestly, and you just realize this is not for them? And if someone's watching, what are some things that you would tell them? Like if you are this, and this might not be for you. Like in as honest as you can. Like what are some character traits that this is just not going to work for you?
That's always a difficult conversation to have. Obviously, you won't know until they start. But mostly it's definitely somebody that I'd say you really have to have a good work ethic in order to be successful in this. Have a little bit of maturity. Usually what I notice is people that mostly got into it because of the money or because their friend is doing it and they're like, you know what, this is interesting. Let me start off and do this. Is usually the people I find having the most difficulties in completing their training. And I would definitely encourage really not taking out huge amounts of loans. Definitely get started. There's nobody that cannot start training. I wouldn't preclude anybody from, hey, if you're this type of person, this isn't for you. I'd mostly just say, be sure that this is something you can complete and this is something that you're going to achieve without taking a huge amount of financial risk at first. Start off slow, see if this works out. And then if it doesn't, it's okay. It's a big responsibility to fly a plane. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means this might not be a good career path for you. Therefore, don't get yourself in thousands and thousands of dollars in debt. And it's definitely a harder conversation to have when that is the case and it's not working out.
No, that's a great question. So there are schools out there, and I'm just going to put this out for everybody. There are schools out there that will take the money.
Yep.
And if you fail out or decide that this isn't for you inside of your private, they are inside the contract. They are going to keep the rest of the money, right? Let's just. I'll make that easy.
Yeah.
If you've signed up with that school and you've gone and borrowed $100,000 and you decide at private this isn't going to work for me, and you don't even complete your private, let's put it that way, you are $100,000 in debt with nothing
to show for it.
Nothing to show for it. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's very real. I think in previous podcasts where we've said it is, start doing, first off, get your medical.
Right.
Go make sure you can pass your medical before you do anything else. Then, and I would add into that saying, if you think you want to go career, then definitely go and do your first class medical and make sure you're good for that. Then start doing the written. I mean, Sporties, King, Claim, they all do.
Right.
Where you can do that training online. And I believe you get the endorsement from one of their instructors to go do the written.
Yep.
And I do believe that you can go and do the written without ever flying a plane.
Yeah.
If you can get through that written, that's really a main sticking point, I think, for a lot of people. It's a mental block that goes in place that I have to pass this written.
Right.
So I would say get the written knocked out, and then go and do your private.
It also looks good for the instructor.
Yeah.
If a student pilot shows up day one, medical license in hand, student pilot license in hand, and written done, that just shows to the instructor that, okay, this person is dedicated. I'm going to dedicate my time as well as much as they put into it to teach them and get them through it. So it's definitely a positive to get all that stuff knocked out.
Yeah, it's definitely putting your best foot forward and showing your best side. So yeah, That's a biggie right there.
Right.
And keep on top of the writtens, right? All the way through. If you're doing your private, as soon as you're done your private or during private, start studying for that instrument.
Yes.
I do believe that it helps inside your private anyway, because you're going to need to be able to do, your VOR navs and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So you should be able to. There's a lot of correlation that's there that is going to help you out inside of that. So that's big,
and it's
big,
also
big.
having the mentality of training not just for the check ride, but to be just a good pilot.
Yep.
Not just enough to pass, but enough to be safe and actually show a decent amount of proficiency in flying. So that it goes a long way to be one step ahead of your training.
Yeah, absolutely.